Simon Legree is a central antagonist in Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe and published in 1852. The novel is a powerful anti-slavery work that exposed the cruelty of slavery in the United States. Simon Legree is a brutal plantation owner in the Deep South, notorious for his cruelty, moral corruption, and lack of humanity. He represents the extreme embodiment of the dehumanizing force of slavery, standing in direct opposition to the moral strength and Christian faith of Uncle Tom. One character story. Simon Legree enters the narrative when Uncle Tom is sold south after a series of financial misfortunes befall his original owner. Unlike previous masters, Legree is depicted as a tyrant who rules his plantation through fear, violence, and psychological domination. His estate is isolated, reflecting both geographical and moral desolation. Legree's treatment of enslaved people is exceptionally cruel. He deliberately seeks to break their spirits, forcing them into relentless labor and punishing any sign of resistance. He relies on brutality not only as discipline, but as a means of asserting absolute control. His methods include physical violence, emotional torment, and manipulation, all aimed at stripping individuals of dignity and identity. When Uncle Tom arrives, Legree quickly recognizes Tom's moral strength and religious conviction. Rather than respecting these qualities, he sees them as threats. Determined to dominate Tom completely, Legree attempts to force him into complicity with cruelty, specifically by ordering him to whip other enslaved individuals. Tom refuses, guided by his Christian principles, which infuriates Legree. Legree's obsession with breaking Tom intensifies. He isolates him, subjects him to harsher labor, and tries to undermine his faith. However, Tom's resilience only deepens Legree's frustration. Tom's refusal to yield exposes Legree's moral weakness, highlighting the contrast between spiritual strength and physical power. The conflict reaches its climax when Tom refuses to reveal the whereabouts of two enslaved women who have escaped. Enraged, Legree orders Tom to be beaten severely. This act ultimately leads to Tom's death. Even in his final moments, Tom remains steadfast in his faith and forgiveness, which stands in stark contrast to Legree's moral decay. Thus, Legree's story is not one of growth or redemption, but of increasing cruelty and self-destruction. His inability to break Tom underscores the limits of his power and reveals the enduring strength of moral conviction. Two role in the narrative. Simon Legree serves as the primary antagonist and the ultimate representation of slavery's brutality in the novel. While earlier masters display varying degrees of kindness or moral conflict, Legree embodies the system at its worst, unrestrained by conscience or social expectation. His role is to bring the narrative to its moral and emotional peak. By placing Uncle Tom under the control of such a cruel figure, the novel intensifies its critique of slavery. Legree's actions force Tom into situations that test his faith, integrity, and humanity to their limits. Furthermore, Legree functions as a foil to Uncle Tom. Where Tom is compassionate, faithful, and morally steadfast, Legree is cruel, cynical, and spiritually empty. This contrast reinforces the novel's central themes of Christian morality and the inherent dignity of all human beings. Legree also plays a structural role by driving the narrative toward tragedy. His plantation becomes the setting for the novel's most harrowing events, ensuring that the reader fully confronts the horrors of slavery. Without Legree, the novel's moral argument would lack its most powerful and disturbing evidence. 3. Symbolic significance. Simon Legree symbolizes the moral corruption inherent in the institution of slavery. He is not merely an individual villain, but a representation of how absolute power can degrade both the oppressor and the oppressed. His character illustrates how slavery fosters cruelty, erodes empathy, and destroys moral integrity. Legree also represents the failure of materialism and domination as sources of power. Despite his control over others, he is spiritually empty and deeply insecure. His inability to break Uncle Tom symbolizes the ultimate triumph of moral and spiritual strength over physical force. Harriet Beecher Stowe likely created Legree to expose the worst realities of slavery to her readers, particularly those in the North who may have been unaware of its full brutality. By presenting such an extreme figure, she ensures that the moral injustice of slavery cannot be ignored or minimized. Readers have historically viewed Legree as one of the most chilling villains in American literature. He is often interpreted as a necessary exaggeration that reveals deeper truths about the system he represents. While some critics argue that he is overly symbolic, most agree that his character powerfully conveys the cruelty and inhumanity of slavery. For conclusion, Simon Legree is a ruthless plantation owner whose cruelty and moral emptiness define him as the ultimate antagonist in Uncle Tom's Cabin. His character is introduced as a figure of unchecked power whose primary goal is to dominate and dehumanize those under his control. Symbolically, Legree represents the corrupting influence of slavery itself, illustrating how the system destroys both victims and perpetrators. His inability to break Uncle Tom highlights the enduring power of faith and moral conviction. From a reader's perspective, Legree remains a deeply impactful and disturbing figure. He is widely recognized as a powerful literary device that exposes the horrors of slavery and reinforces the novel's moral message. Through Legree, the narrative achieves its strongest emotional and ethical impact, ensuring that the injustice of slavery is both seen and felt.